Om is the Swedish word for about. So it's about parental alienation, ompa, ompa.se. It all began in the summer of 2019 when I saw this scientific literature about, relating to parental alienation. And then I had some experiences with very bad deniers of the parental alienation concept. I was actually thrown out of a Facebook group with 40,000 members when I had asked if there was someone who was interested in what happens in the brains of the kids when they're exposed to this problem and so on. And they threw me out within 24 hours. The whole issue was about violent fathers, and it was pedophilia, propaganda, blah, 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 a bunch of things like that. And so I just decided then, this was September 2019, I must have my own platform to discuss this. And 2 months later, I started this website. And I was very determined that it should be in Swedish, because there was so much of information, in particular in English, but I needed to be a translator of some of this and just post references there. I have a background reading scientific literature at academic level since 1971, so it's been more than 50 years now. I was also well acquainted with the medical terminology, and this helped me a lot to go into the literature, dig into this. But I just see how the background, the professional background that I'm referring to, how that continuously is expanding. And there are probably around 2,000 references at my website today. Material from 190 peer-reviewed journals which have published articles about parental alienation, and almost in every single case use the words parental alienation. Find references, several new ones, I'd say every month at least. About 1/3 of the contacts I get is through direct emails because they found my website. I mean, there are 3 major areas here. It's medicine, including psychology, biology, that's one part. And then we have the legal journals carrying, there may be the words law, court, legal, or forensics in the title of the journal. So that's 2 of these. And then the 3rd one is the social sciences, sociology, and sociology expands towards everything dealing with families and children. The social part with the family and the child, that is a very big issue here, integrated into this. I have a smaller section about the deniers, but I realize that is becoming such a large area of this, and also important. So I don't have the time to try to do some complete list of all the misinformation. There's a vast number, but Dr. Bill Bernier and others have mapped a lot of that. So I'm very thankful for that. That's very important work about the misinformation and so on. But what has surprised me, and that was already 1.5 years after I had launched my site, was that it was essentially all in Swedish. And I discovered that there were a lot of people from other countries finding my website, probably because many of the references give the keywords. So people Google and they find my site and so on. And today I typically over 1 month have visitors from at least about 70 countries. And what I did about 1.5 years ago was that I actually added some brief sentences in English and Spanish at my website to make it easier for people from other countries to browse through my pages, because it's getting quite large by now. I met Sophie more than 3 years ago. We have different academic backgrounds, and that's very good because we complement each other. course, we began to collaborate about the literature and looked more systematically about the character of these journals. We analyzed the parental alienation concept from a cause-effect aspect, and it's a specific model we're using there. So we got access this way to much more literature. So we have actually plowed through, I'd say, probably 4,000 or 5,000 references at the abstract level. But of course, we threw away 85% at least directly because it's not relevant. But we've seen a lot within the larger frame of conflicts in families and all these diagnoses and the effects, psychological effects and so on. I have a broad science background, but I cannot claim that I have any formal connection to these subjects. One of the drivers between looking at the character of the journals was simply to understand to what extent can this be read about, and what audiences do we, the scientific community, or the words you want to use, to what extent do they get to know about the concept parental alienation? How spread is the concept? The limitation here is, of course, that there are many languages which we don't know anything about, so there are probably very many more journals out there. That's a sign of quality when it's published in a peer-reviewed journal. It means that specialists in the field have looked at your paper before it's allowed to be publicized. I'm aware of about 30 articles in Psychology Today, which is a magazine. It's not a peer-reviewed journal. There are about 30 articles there about various aspects of parental alienation. There are many other media besides peer-reviewed journals that are valuable resources, and you can learn a lot just by searching on YouTube and so on. So it's definitely a social and medical problem that should be dealt with such. I mean, the children, as it seems with all the information available, should be treated as emergency cases. They should be dealt with promptly. It's completely wrong to have these cases running for years through legal proceedings and so on. If we talk about the subject, parental alienation itself, I mean, of course, there are more things to learn. We would perhaps like to have more statistics around it. But there have been so many studies about both the alienator. Those are most difficult, of course, because they won't be telling what they're doing, but you can find out indirectly and so on. And target parents, the alienated parents. Of course, there have been studies published about those and alienated children, and also the three possible relations between these. And sometimes the alienator is not a parent. It could be a grandparent who does not like, say, the spouse of his son or something like that. So there are other actors possible in this. The general pattern and the major questions, I think, very much have been understood by now. There's going to come more information here about parental alienation, and sometimes a few things that you learned previously may be shown to, well, there may be a need to modify it, which strengthens parental alienation theory, because then we understand more about it and so on. But that's one side of it. But it has become very obvious that the misinformation about parental alienation, the misrepresentation and the denial and so on, has become a larger issue. I have been into very many different scientific fields since the early 70s, read many of these things just for my own interest and so on, and read about various controversies of all sorts of issues. I have never seen any context that has been, where there has been such a strong force against the knowledge about something as I see in this. It's a big problem, and it has to be dealt with within politics, within or with media and other ways, with the authorities, of course. You can study this without mentioning the words parental alienation if you don't want to. You can just talk about contact sabotage and you study that. But it's part of the overall picture. But Sweden is behind here, I think. I could say that the personality problem we're dealing with here very much resembles or parallels the behavior and strategies and so on that we find and methods that we find in cult leaders, in dictators, people who often run into positions of authority. It's we against them. Dr. Amy Baker has published several articles on this issue. It's about isolation and extreme information control. Just look at any typical dictator and you'll have the same attitude there. If we talk about the effects in the children, for instance, one thing that comes back all the time is low self-esteem, depression, low trust in oneself and others, guilt feelings, anxiety. From a scientific point, it would be very interesting to know more about what happens in the brain of a child who is abused emotionally, and in particular parental alienation, which is a very specific form of emotional abuse. For instance, emotional neglect, which can be part of this, of course. Those who are working with that field, they know already which parts of the brains seem to be most affected in terms of memory functions, the functions of the brain which have to do with decision making, associations between different types of areas that have to do with the survival or defense mechanisms of a child. So that is can more be understood about the behavioral aspects in terms of molecular biology, because that would be a way to understand this even deeper. But on the other hand, we can see we know in practical terms very much what the problem is. A field that's relatively recent in molecular biology since about 25 years back, and that's epigenetics, where actually the DNA we're born with, the function of it, the program is modified through environmental stress factors that we live with since actually before we're born and through adults. And that can affect the development of our brains and so on. Those are scars that won't heal. They're lifelong, and that's very important to understand. These scars that you don't see, that's a very particular aspect of this, and perhaps why it's not recognized as much. Some people may not think that emotional abuse is important. I think it's very severe. I cannot come to any other conclusion.